Imagine a powerful businessman, Alejandro, who has everything: wealth, success, and a luxurious life. But nothing could prepare him for the shocking moment that would change his world forever. His daughter Charlotte is gravely ill, trapped in a body that refuses to cooperate. With her health deteriorating, Alejandro hires a caregiver, Lucia, but never expected her presence would bring more than just care for his daughter. As Charlotte's condition takes a surprising turn, Alejandro finds himself not only witnessing a miracle, but also battling his own emotions as he discovers a love he never saw coming. Could the healing power of love and dedication save them all? Stay tuned as a father, a caregiver, and a little girl face the most unexpected and life-changing journey together. In the heart of New York, nestled in the towering cityscape, stood the magnificent Valmont Mansion, a sprawling estate that was a silent testament to the power and wealth of its owner, Alexander Valmont. The opulent hallways echoed with the sounds of a life lived at the pinnacle of success, but there was an invisible heaviness hanging over the house, a weight that could not be swept away by all the riches in the world. For months now, Charlotte Valmont, Alexander's 8-year-old daughter, had been confined to a bed in the grand room, her frail body tethered to machines that monitored every heartbeat. The little girl, once full of energy, now lay motionless, her once bright eyes dimmed by a degenerative disease that had slowly stolen her vitality. Doctors had offered no hope, their words as cold and empty as the sterile air in her room. Alejandro Valmont, a man known for his ruthless business dealings and cold demeanor in the boardroom, stood at the edge of Charlotte's bed, his heart heavy with a pain that no amount of money could cure. His wife, Emily, had passed away in a tragic accident months ago, a crash that had not only stolen his partner, but had left their daughter fighting for her life, unable to escape the bed that had become her prison. There was no escape for Alexander, not from the guilt, not from the overwhelming sadness that consumed him every waking moment. His company, which he had built from the ground up, needed him, but his heart, what was left of it, was locked in that sterile room with Charlotte Lucia Mendoza. "Please come in." The soft voice of the nurse interrupted his thoughts. It was time for Charlotte's medication. He stepped aside, watching as Lucia Montgomery, the nurse he had hired just days ago, administered the medication with care, speaking to Charlotte in a gentle tone that was worlds apart from the clinical nature of the medical equipment around her. As Lucia finished and exited the room, she turned to him, her expression weary but kind. "Mr. Valmont, I need to be honest with you, Charlotte. She needs more than just medicine and machines. She needs someone to be with her, to talk to her, to remind her that there is a world outside these walls. She needs someone who can bring joy, even if only for a moment." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. He knew she was right. He had spent all his time working, building his empire. But what had it cost him? His daughter was dying, and all he could offer her was a sterile room and impersonal care. That night he couldn't sleep. Thoughts of his wife, of the life he had once had, swirled in his mind. Emily had been the one to balance his world, to teach him how to love and live outside of work. But now she was gone, and he was alone, lost in the vastness of his mansion, where the silence seemed to mock his inability to save his daughter. The next morning he made a decision. "Get me Lucia Montgomery," he told his assistant. The search began immediately for someone who could dedicate their life to caring for Charlotte, someone who would stay by her side 24/7. Nurses, therapists, even spiritual healers came and went, but none of them had the warmth and connection Alexander knew his daughter needed. And then one day Lucia walked into his office. She was not what he expected. Her clothes were clean but worn, her hands rough from years of hard work, and her eyes, though filled with uncertainty, held a fierce determination. "Mr. Valmont," Lucia said, her voice shaking slightly as she extended her hand. "I'm here to help." He studied her for a moment before motioning to the chair in front of his desk. "Tell me why you think you're the right person for this job." Lucia's voice faltered slightly as she spoke, but her words were clear. "I may not have a prestigious resume or fancy credentials, but I have a heart willing to care for your daughter as if she were my own. I've spent my whole life caring for those who needed me, including my younger brother who had cerebral palsy. I know what it's like to watch someone fight for their life, and I know how important it is to never give up." Her sincerity hit him. There was something raw, something real about Lucia that the others lacked. He asked about her situation, and she told him the truth. Her brother had passed away 6 months ago, and since then she had been adrift looking for a purpose. And Alexander, in a rare moment of vulnerability, made a decision. "You're hired," he said firmly. "You'll move in tomorrow. My assistant will give you all the details." The next day, Lucia arrived at the mansion, a small suitcase in hand, her heart heavy with both hope and fear. She was escorted to Charlotte's room by the housekeeper, and when she entered, she saw Alexander standing at the foot of the bed, watching his daughter with a mix of helplessness and love. He turned when she entered. There was no speech, no grand greeting. He simply nodded and walked out, leaving Lucia alone with Charlotte. Lucia approached the bed slowly, her heart aching as she saw the child so fragile, so lifeless. She took Charlotte's hand gently in hers. "Hi, Charlotte," Lucia whispered softly. "I'm Lucia. I'm here to take care of you, to be your friend. I know we don't know each other yet, but I'm going to do my best to make your days brighter, okay?" And then she began to read. The first book she chose was The Little Prince, a story she had loved as a child, a tale of adventure, stars and roses. Her voice filled the room, soothing Charlotte, offering her a glimpse of a world she could no longer touch. As Lucia continued to care for Charlotte, something remarkable began to happen. Alexander, who had once been consumed by his business, began to watch her from a distance. He saw the tenderness in her touch, the quiet dedication in her actions, and he started to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, but that was only the beginning. Days turned into weeks at the Valmont mansion. Lucia's presence in Charlotte's life brought a subtle, yet undeniable shift. The heavy silence that once permeated the halls of the estate now had moments of lightness. Moments filled with laughter and whispers of stories. Lucia had done something no doctor or therapist could. She had given Charlotte the one thing she needed more than anything: hope. But for Alexander, it wasn't so simple. Every time he walked past Charlotte's room, he was haunted by the painful reality of her condition. He had built an empire, climbed to the top of every business mountain. But when it came to his daughter, he felt utterly powerless. No amount of money, no luxurious mansion, no high-end doctors could save her. But there was something in Lucia's unwavering optimism that stirred something deep within him. For the first time in months, he began to wonder if there was a chance, a real chance, for Charlotte to heal. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of gold and purple, Alexander found himself standing at the doorway of Charlotte's room again. Lucia was there, just as she always was, reading a story to Charlotte. But this time, something was different. Charlotte's fingers twitched ever so slightly. Lucia, ever watchful, caught the subtle movement and froze. Her heart raced in her chest as she leaned closer, her breath catching in her throat. "Charlotte," Lucia whispered softly, her voice barely audible. Charlotte's eyes fluttered, and for a brief moment the room seemed to hold its breath. Then, almost imperceptibly, Charlotte moved her fingers again. "I felt that," Lucia whispered in awe. "You're trying, aren't you?" And then, as if answering her, Charlotte's fingers moved again, just enough to confirm what they both had been hoping for. A sign of flicker of life in a body that had been still for so long. Lucia rushed to the door, unable to contain her excitement. "Mr. Valmont, you need to see this," she called urgently, her voice trembling with emotion. Alexander, who had been pacing nervously in his study, rushed to the room. The sight before him was nothing short of a miracle. His daughter, the girl who had been locked in a silent battle with her own body for months, was moving. Her fingers, weak as they were moving, responding, showing signs of life. Charlotte, Alexander's voice cracked as he approached her bedside, his hand trembling as he reached for hers. "Can you hear me? If you can move your fingers again." The seconds stretched on, impossibly long, as the room held its breath, and then, in the faintest of movements, Charlotte's fingers twitched once more. Alexander could barely hold back the flood of emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. His eyes filled with tears, his voice barely a whisper. "My little girl." Lucia stood behind him, watching with quiet pride as Alexander reached out to hold Charlotte's hand. There was no triumph in her gaze, only a deep sense of gratitude. She knew this was only the beginning, a small victory. Yes, but a victory nonetheless. Charlotte had responded, and that response was enough to spark something in Alexander, a tiny ember of hope that began to burn brighter with each passing day. In the following days, Alexander couldn't stay away. He found himself visiting Charlotte more often, watching Lucia interact with his daughter, learning from her. He started reading the stories Lucia had read to Charlotte, doing his best to mimic the gentle cadence of her voice, even though it felt strange at first. He'd never been a father like this soft, caring patient, but something about it felt right. One afternoon, as the golden light of dusk filtered through the windows, Alexander sat by Charlotte's bed reading aloud from The Little Prince. His voice, once so authoritative and cold, now had a tenderness he never knew he possessed. Lucia watched from the doorway, her heart swelling with pride as she saw the man who had once seemed so distant begin to transform before her eyes. But just as the room was filled with a newfound warmth, fate threw them another curveball. Late that night, as the family settled into a fragile routine, Charlotte's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. Her breathing became shallow, her temperature spiked. Lucia, ever vigilant, immediately called for help. Doctors rushed in, their movements frantic as they assessed Charlotte's condition. Alexander was frozen, unable to move, his heart racing in his chest. "Is she going to be okay?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lucia didn't answer right away. She could feel the weight of his fear, the anguish in his voice, but she couldn't lie to him. "I don't know, Mr. Valmont, but we will do everything we can." The night stretched on in a blur of medical interventions, doctors, nurses, and a sense of helplessness that clung to them all. Lucia stayed by Charlotte's side, holding her hand, speaking softly to her, trying to soothe her. Alexander stood in the corner of the room, his arms crossed, his face a mask of anguish. He had seen the best doctors, had thrown every resource at his daughter's condition. But now, in this moment of crisis, all the power in the world felt useless. As dawn approached, there was a glimmer of hope. Charlotte's breathing became more regular. Her fever began to subside. The doctors cautiously reassured Alexander, but the fear in his eyes didn't fully fade. It never would. The battle for his daughter's life was far from over. The following morning, after a restless night, Alexander found himself standing alone in the hallway, staring out at the expansive gardens of Valmont Mansion. The sun was rising, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. He had no answers, no guarantees, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't just the doctors or the medications that were giving him hope. It was Lucia and Charlotte's own fight to survive. Lucia had given him something that none of his wealth, none of his power could provide. She had given him the courage to believe again, and for that he would be forever grateful. Weeks passed, and the once silent mansion was now filled with the quiet hum of life, a life that had been revived in part by the unwavering determination of Lucia and the strength of little Charlotte. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic about her recovery, but it wasn't until that one quiet morning in the soft glow of early dawn that the miracle everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. Charlotte woke up that morning, her eyes slowly fluttering open. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she blinked, taking in the light streaming through the curtains. Her mind was foggy, but there was something else, a clarity, a presence that hadn't been there before. She looked around the room, her gaze landing on Lucia, who had been by her side through it all. The room was quiet, but the air felt lighter, as though something had shifted. Something magical had begun to unfold. "Lucia!" Charlotte's voice was barely a whisper, fragile but unmistakably there. Lucia's heart stopped for a moment, her breath catching in her throat. She had been so used to caring for Charlotte, speaking to her as though she could hear her. But this was different. This was real, Charlotte's first words. Tears welled up in Lucia's eyes as she leaned over, gently brushing a strand of hair from Charlotte's forehead. "You're awake," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're going to be okay, sweetie." Charlotte's gaze softened as she struggled to sit up, her small hand reaching out to Lucia. "I missed you," she said, her voice stronger than it had been the day before. Lucia smiled through her tears, her heart swelling with love for the little girl who had become like a daughter to her. "I've missed you too, more than you could ever know." Across the room, Alejandro had been watching from the doorway, his heart racing as he witnessed the reunion between Lucia and Charlotte. There was no denying it, the changes in his daughter were remarkable. There were still moments of doubt, moments when he wondered if this was all just a dream, but seeing Charlotte awake, her eyes sparkling with life, he knew this was real. He stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. "Charlotte," he said softly, kneeling beside her bed, "you're awake." You're really awake." Charlotte turned to him, her small hand reaching out to him as well. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I missed you so much." Alejandro's heart broke and healed at the same time. He had spent so many nights afraid that he might lose his daughter, but now here she was, alive and fighting. He took her hand in his, feeling her warmth, feeling the connection that had been absent for so long. "I'm so proud of you, Charlotte," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "So proud." But as the days passed, it became clear that this was only the beginning of a new journey. Charlotte's recovery was slow but steady. Each day brought small victories, each step forward a testament to her resilience and to the love and care that Lucia had poured into her. But there were still challenges ahead. The road to recovery was long, and even as Charlotte's physical condition improved, the emotional scars remained, the trauma of her illness. The months of silence had taken a toll on her, and there were days when she felt overwhelmed by it all. During one of these difficult days, as Charlotte sat in the garden, gazing out at the world that seemed so far away, Lucia sat down beside her. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" she asked gently, her hand resting on Charlotte's. "I don't know," Charlotte replied softly, her voice hesitant. "Everything feels so different now. I don't know how to catch up with it all." Lucia smiled, her heart breaking for the little girl who had been through so much. "You don't have to catch up, Charlotte. You've already come so far. Just take it one step at a time, okay? You're not alone in this." Charlotte looked up at her, her eyes full of uncertainty. "But what if I don't get better? What if I can't do it?" Lucia squeezed her hand, her voice firm and full of conviction. "You are doing it, Charlotte. You're doing more than anyone could have imagined. And as long as I'm here, as long as your dad is here, we'll always be right by your side." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from fear. They were tears of gratitude, tears of hope. She had spent so long in the darkness, trapped in a body that wouldn't listen. But now, for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of light. And then in a moment that seemed to suspend time, Charlotte smiled. It wasn't a huge smile, but it was enough. Enough to show that she believed in herself, believed in the people who loved her, believed that maybe, just maybe, she could heal. Meanwhile, Alejandro had been grappling with his own emotions. Seeing Charlotte awake, hearing her voice was a dream come true. But there was another part of him, a part that had been awakened by Lucia's unwavering dedication, that was beginning to see things differently. He was no longer just the father, the businessman, the man who had everything but still felt empty. He was learning to be a man of heart, a man who knew that love and family mattered more than anything else in the world. One night, after a long day of therapy sessions for Charlotte, Alejandro invited Lucia to join him on the terrace. The sky was clear, the stars twinkling like diamonds above them. As they stood there looking out over the grounds of the mansion, Alejandro finally spoke. "Lucia," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I don't think I've ever properly thanked you. You've done more for my daughter than I ever could. You've given her the gift of hope." Lucia turned to him, her heart pounding in her chest. "You don't have to thank me, Alejandro. I just want what's best for her." "I know," he replied, his voice softening. "But it's not just about her. It's about all of us. You've shown me what it means to really love, to really care. And for that, I'll be forever grateful." There was a pause, a moment that felt like it could stretch into forever. Then Alejandro reached out and took her hand in his. "Lucia, I don't know where we'll go from here, but I want you to know. I want you to be a part of this, of our family forever." Tears welled up in Lucia's eyes as she looked at him, her heart swelling with emotions she hadn't dared to acknowledge. "I've always wanted that too, Alejandro," she whispered. And in that moment, everything seemed to fall into place. They had come so far from darkness to light, from despair to hope. And no matter what came next, they knew that together they could face anything. What do you think about the transformation in Alejandro and Lucia's relationship? How do you feel about Charlotte's progress? Do you think this family will stay strong through the challenges ahead? Share your thoughts with us. If you've enjoyed this story, drop a 100 in the comments below and tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to share this video with your friends, and let's spread the love.